This is why you should never search your own name on findagrave.com. One day, a girl was at school just messing around on the school's computer homepage, procrastinating about some assignment that she had to complete. On the side of the page, it showed multiple website links. Usually they were for the different classes that she took, but one stuck out to her because she'd never seen it before. It was called www.findagrave.com. Curiosity got the best of her, so she decided to click the link, ignoring the uneasy feeling telling her otherwise. The website was rather simple. It was mostly a white page with text in the center saying search 87 million grave records. The girl started typing in dead relatives' names of hers. The search would display all of their details and a photo, but the photo wasn't of them, but rather their grave. Someone had taken the time to go around to the grave sites and take photos of them, and this was the exact same for every relative that she searched. That night when she got home, she still felt uneasy. So she told her mother about the strange website she came across and asked her who took the photos of her relatives' tombstones. Her mother had no idea and just laughed it off as a strange occurrence. The girl was still so curious about the website, so she decided to investigate it a little bit further, typing in names of famous dead people like Kurt Cobain, and sure enough, all of their tombstones would also appear. She searched the website late into the night and started typing names of random alive celebrities. Then she decided to type in names of alive people that she knew. And finally, she decided to search her own name. 4 searches appeared. She was intrigued to know where they were from and when they died. The other 4 people with the exact same name as hers were in states surrounding her own. She started to have a bad feeling again, and just as she was about to exit the page, she now notices that the website says showing 4 or 5 results. Confused because she thought that she'd seen them all, she decided to go to the new entry. It read her name, her birth year, and the date she died was the next day. The photo wasn't of a tombstone though. It was a picture of her staring at a computer screen with a dark figure standing behind her. The time was 11:59, just before midnight.
You won't believe what this woman did. In 1972, a woman appeared in a Los Angeles hospital wearing nothing but a white dress covered in red liquid. But this wasn't an ordinary woman. Her face almost looked like a mannequin. She did not have any eyebrows, and her face was smeared in makeup. It even gets creepier because the woman had a kitten in her mouth. She threw it on the floor and collapsed. She was then rushed into a hospital room. She was completely calm, expressionless, and motionless. However, when it was time to sedate her, she lashed out, and 2 nurses had to hold her down. The doctor asked her, "What are you?" She then turned to the doctor and smiled, revealing that she did not have normal human teeth. She had razor-sharp teeth. She signaled him down to her as if to whisper in his ear. She then attacked him, and while he lay on the floor suffering, she leaned over top of him and said, "I am God." She has never been seen since then.
This is the longest true horrifying story episode. This episode is worth the time. The story took place in Nador, Morocco in the year 2015. The story was submitted by Ilyas. Back in 2015, Ilyas was an 18-year-old Moroccan Muslim that lived in Norway. One night, Ilyas was back in Morocco visiting family, and he stayed up late watching a movie at home till 3 in the morning. The living room was very warm, so he got up to open the window for fresh air. As he was at the window, being at the 4th floor in that building, he looks down, and the street was dark and empty, but there was one man wearing black from head to toe with a hood covering his face. He wasn't sure why that man was outside at that time. He looked away, but then peeked one last time out of curiosity. When he looked at him again, the man had his hands on a building's wall. He was strangely just feeling the wall, and out of nowhere, the man vanishes through that wall. He rubbed his eyes in disbelief after what he just witnessed. Ilyas swears that there was no door in that spot. It was just physically impossible. He forgets about this after a while and then flies back to Norway. 6 months later, in Norway, Ilyas experiences his first ever sleep paralysis which in Islam is known as Jathum. He vividly remembers having a conversation with a dark figure, and his mom also witnessed him speak in his sleep. He woke up after the paralysis with swollen feet and rashes all over his body. They rushed to the ER, and none of the doctors could diagnose what caused his body to react that way. He was finally discharged after treatment, but after that day, Ilyas was never the same person. He always acted differently. He was antisocial. He was distant from people. And his mom always told him that he needed ruqya. A few months later, they fly back to Morocco for the next holiday season. He was always against his mother's ruqya idea. However, he decided to fight his thoughts and do it. He had a cousin that was also suffering, and she visited a raqi in Morocco quite regularly. So they went together with both of their moms. When they reached, they sat down and waited for their session. Ilyas could hear the raqi in the other room, and he felt extremely uneasy and started to sweat. The Quran recitation, the ruqya, the sounds, made him not even want to look at that direction. He was angry. He went outside for a moment to gain back his senses until their turn finally reached. The raqi called them in and started. Ilyas's cousin immediately started reacting horribly when the Quran started. She was screaming so loud. Ilyas started losing senses throughout his entire body. He was sweating, he was unable to move, and he was shouting from fear. He does pray, and he does read Quran, but he was so confused as to why he was screaming. He felt like he was being tortured. The slightest pinch from the raqi felt like it was a knife stab. It was very powerful, and this is where he felt a jinn's presence inside of him. The following night was the most horrific night for Ilyas. For a whole week, the man was not able to sleep alone, and he would get mentally abused by these demons haunting him. Weeks go by. Ilyas started getting demonic thoughts of harming his own family. He hated everyone. When he would look at his own sister, her face would seem distorted to him. He knows these beings are playing with his head. His whole life turned upside down. He would regularly think of harming his own family, but luckily, he never did. A few months later, Ilyas was back in Norway and life was back to normal. He was relieved that he was in a good state of mind and that the horror was over. At the time, he worked at a local grocery store. After a Christmas celebration at work, which he did not participate in, it was late at night. He was walking one of his colleagues back home from work. She was a young woman and she was scared to walk alone. After they reached outside her place, she asked him, "Where's that other girl that was with us?" "What girl?" Ilyas asked. "There was no one there. It was just you and I." She swore that there was another woman with black hair, pale skin, standing next to him the whole time, staring at Ilyas's colleague with anger. Even though this entity gave Ilyas a break, this jinn was still around, haunting everyone that has intentions towards Ilyas.
This is why you have to be careful who you let into your Halloween parties. So this is a photo of who police believed was a guest at a Halloween party in Rochester, New York in the 1940s. The party was being thrown by Jack and Amelia Layton, and they actually noticed that this guest was outside of the party watching the guests through a window. The report claims that Amelia believed the guest was her friend Jan, who tended to go above and beyond for Halloween, creating very scary costumes. So she let this person in believing it was her friend Jan. But then 20 minutes later, Jan shows up, and that guest could not be found anywhere. So Amelia starts running around the party asking everyone if they knew who that guest was, and no one had recognized that person. So she goes into her daughter's room, who was playing while the party was happening. And the police report states that the only thing there left of Amelia's daughter was a bloody shoe. 4 other reports of this guest being at parties that night were called into police, and all of them resulted in missing children's cases. The identity of this person has never been found, and none of the kids have been found.
What about the "I know you're not sleeping" story? When I was a little kid, this story was one of the scariest I've ever heard. So disclaimer, you might not sleep tonight. One night, a boy was laying in his bed trying to fall back asleep after waking up in the middle of the night. He was just laying there in the pitch black darkness when he heard a noise coming from the hallway outside of his bedroom door. All of a sudden, his bedroom door swung open, and in walked a strange man carrying the 2 bodies of the child's parents, whom the man had just unalived. He entered the boy's room and propped the parents' bodies up on a chair and then started writing something on the wall in the parents' blood. The boy didn't know what to do, so he closed his eyes as tight as he could and tried to pretend that he was asleep. Then the strange man got down on the floor and crawled underneath the boy's bed. The boy then opened his eyes, knowing that the man was underneath his bed. As his eyes began to adjust to the darkness, he was able to make out what the man had written on the wall. In the parents' the man
This
had
is why
written,
you should never play hide and seek. A mom decided to play hide and seek with her 2 kids. The mom began counting, ready or not, here I come. She begins searching the downstairs kitchen because she knows that they hide there every single time. As she's walking to the kitchen, she starts saying, I wonder where they are. She looks under the table and sees they aren't there, which is kind of odd. She knew they were too scared to go into the basement alone, but she decided to check anyway. They weren't there either. She began to panic. The mom then says, Jordan, Casey, come out now, mommy's not playing anymore. There was no answer. Panic really begins to set in. She decides to call 911 and reaches an operator. She tells the operator what's wrong, and the operator sends an officer to her house. Once the officer arrives, he says, don't worry, we will find them. As she's sitting in the living room, she hears giggling and laughing and hears a closet door slam upstairs. She sprints upstairs and says, Jordan, Casey, you worried me sick. She opened the closet door and nobody was there. While all of this is going on, she hears the doorbell ring. She runs downstairs and finds the officer holding Jordan and Casey. The officer says they were hiding in the shed out back. Then Jordan looks at mommy and says, why were you telling us to
remember
stay?
the scary story, The Creature in the Cellar? The story goes like this. There was a little boy named Tommy who was so utterly terrified of his basement. Anytime he was in the kitchen near the cellar door, he would scream and cry and kick and just want to leave. His parents decided to take him to see a therapist. When they asked Tommy why he was so scared of the basement, he just said that he always felt like there was a creature down there trying to get him. Tommy's dad said, that's impossible. I go in the basement every day. I know that there's nothing down there. The doctor then told Tommy's parents to give him exposure therapy, which they basically said make him sit in front of the cellar door alone until he's not scared anymore. So that night, when it got dark outside, Tommy's dad nailed the basement door open, turned off all the lights, and lit a single candle, placed it on the kitchen table, and made Tommy sit in the kitchen alone in front of the basement door. That night, they went to check on Tommy in the kitchen and found that he had been mutilated and unalived. Nobody ever knew exactly what happened to Tommy, but it's safe to assume that he was attacked by whatever he saw living in the